I want to know who gave the orders. I want to know, why the Air Force lied about the air drills that were going on that day, why the CIA lied to Congress, why John Farmer, the 9/11 Commission report lawyer, said that there was a decision not to tell the American people the truth about 9/11.
Hey friends, Sean from SGT Report here. Thank you so very much for tuning in, and a special thanks to my patrons and those who have signed up at sgtreport.tv, both places where I'll be posting exclusive content every week. Hey, before we begin this interview with Richard Gage, the founder of AE 9/11 Truth, and his special guest, just a quick word from this interview's sponsor. Athletes, celebrities, and high performers are swearing by keto. It's the diet being praised around the world for boosting metabolism, elevating energy, and enhancing mental focus. However, the keto diet can be difficult to follow. That's why Keto Elevate was made. Keto Elevate powerfully supports ketone production, whether you follow the keto diet or not. That's right, it can help elevate ketone levels even without the strict no-carb policy. Now, of course, you should probably avoid carbs anyway, but this product will help. There's a 60-day money-back guarantee. Get your own bag for 51% off and free shipping by going to ketowithsgt.com. I'll leave the link below. And welcome back, friends. Thank you so very much for tuning in. Hey guys, I must tell you, I really blew this one. I was supposed to be on the line with these two gentlemen today at 11 a.m. and I got my signals crossed, and we're running a bit late, so we only have 35 minutes before my next interview, but this is going to be a powerful one. It's an important one as we move toward 9/11. I have the founder of AE911truth.org on the line, Richard Gage. Richard, welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here with you, Sean.
Hey, thank you so much. I apologize for this. I left my cell phone in the car. I got my signals crossed, but I'm glad that we connected. You emailed me today. We hopped on the line immediately, and I'm really happy we're doing that because we also have on the line Matt Campbell from the UK. He's the brother of a 9/11 victim. His brother's name was Jeff, who perished in the North Tower on 9/11. He was on the 106th floor of that tower attending a conference. Matt, welcome.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks for inviting me.
Hey, real quickly, which conference was that your brother was attending?
It was the Risk Waters conference. A lot of British victims worked for Risk Waters, I think about 8 of them. And my brother was just one of the attendees there.
Well, I remember that day like it was yesterday, and watching those towers burn, knowing people were trapped in those upper floors, I think to this day is one of the most impactful things that ever happened to me, and if there's any good news, it helped wake me up. That entire day helped wake me up, as it did our friend Richard there. World Trade Center 7, Richard, boy, I'll tell you, never has there been anything I've seen on video that jarred me like the collapse of that building and the media being silent about it. Friends, I want to let you know there is an online 9/11 conference coming up, 9/11 through 9/13, September 11th through September 13th, sponsored, I believe, by Richard Gage and AE 9/11 Truth. Tell us about that, Richard.
A pretty extraordinary opportunity, Sean, for everybody to attend because it will be online. And all people have to do is visit our website, which is ae911truth.org. At the time, we'll be live streaming right from that website. And so we have an incredible lineup of pioneers in the 9/11 truth movement. I'll start out by talking about, where we've been coming from at AE 9/11 Truth and where we are and where we're heading, in the next several years. We expect to be gaining massive public awareness of the 9/11 truth issue, what really happened in the destruction of the 3 World Trade Center skyscrapers. And then we'll be starting off with Matt's story, which we're going to be sharing with your audience today. So delighted that Matt is with us. He's been at this now for years and years, trying to get to the heart of what really happened there and what was responsible for the death of his brother, Jeff. We'll get into that, but in the conference after Matt speaks, Dylan Avery, from the creator of Loose Change 9/11, will be on with us. He's made a brand new film about what? The the University of Alaska's report by Professor Leroy Halsey, which completely pulls the rug out from underneath the official NIST report as to what happened at World Trade Center 7. Now, for those of your listeners who may not be aware of World Trade Center 7, here's a 47-story skyscraper that drops like a rock straight down uniformly, symmetrically into its own footprint after witnesses hear explosions. It falls just like the old hotels in Las Vegas, and they come back 8 years later and their final report and try to convince the American people and architects and engineers who hadn't already forgot about the collapse of this building, 8 years later, if they ever really knew, because not one of the 80,000 members of the American Institute of Architects, of which I'm a member, has heard about Building 7, the third worst structural failure in modern history, after the Twin Towers. This is an extraordinary collapse we should all be aware of, but we find in our conferences throughout the country that none of us are aware of it. Anyway, this historic finite element analysis, this major university study, shows that all the columns in this building had to have been removed at once in order for this building to fall at free fall acceleration, which is exactly what it did. Not one of those columns gave any resistance. So this is an amazing opportunity for Leroy Halsey to be present with Dylan and tell the backstory. As well as extended clips from this amazing new documentary that Dylan has now created. We then go into the request for correction, which we've submitted to NIST, which you can do under the Data Quality Act with agencies that give fraudulent reports like we see from NIST. And Tony Zambodi will be with us, and others, Mick Harrison from the Lawyers Committee for 9/11 Inquiry, Ted Walter, all summarizing this 100-page request, which forces NIST into a position of having to revoke its original collapse hypothesis for this Building 7. And then the next day, we start off with the actual evidence. This is called Science Saturday. And on the 12th of September, we bring out more details about Building 7, more details like we're going to talk about today a little bit about the World Trade Center and what caused this incredibly explosive destruction with extreme heat that we talk about in our webinars at AE 9/11 Truth. And then we have the pioneers in the 9/11 Truth movement. We're talking David Ray Griffin, who's written now 14 books on the subject. He's coming back out of retirement, if you will, to sit on a panel with Stephen Jones, who's developed the documentation of extreme heat, and Niels Harrit, who developed the documentation of nanothermite in the peer-reviewed paper. An extraordinary Saturday where we bring these folks out. It's going to be really special. And then we sum up on Sunday, which is the big picture. We bring out Daniela Ganser from Switzerland talking about 9/11 and false flag operations. We bring out James Corbett, who's talking about the Library of Alexandria is on fire, right? That's a historic example of immense censorship where they destroyed the repository of decades of vast knowledge in order to control the people. Well, this is what YouTube is doing now. And James Corbett is all over it, as you have been, of course, Sean. And then we also have John Whitehead of the Rutherford Institute, an expert, a constitutional attorney who has exposed the police state activities since 9/11 as a result of 9/11 and continuing on. This is an amazing conference, and it all goes back to, it starts with 9/11. And that's why, for those of your listeners who are wondering, well, didn't Jeff Campbell die in the North Tower as a result of the planes hitting and then weakening of the steel, according to the official story? And isn't that what caused the deaths of all those people? Well, as you've been saying for how long now, Sean?
Oh boy, it goes back to about 2009, I think, 2010 with you.
Yeah, yeah, it's a long time, and we met at one of our conferences, AE 9/11 Truth in Minneapolis, and it was an extraordinary meeting. And I've been speaking the truth. You've been speaking the truth ever since then. The truth that I've been focusing on, with 3,000 architects and engineers now demanding a new investigation into the destruction of all three of these towers, is Building 7, which we highlighted earlier, but also the Twin Towers, with an extremely explosive behavior here, pulverizing 90,000 tons of concrete in each of these towers into a fine powder that was that rested in a 3-inch blanket across a 3-square-mile area of Lower Manhattan, all outside the footprint of this building. So the concrete wasn't available to crush the rest of the building, and neither was the steel, Sean. The steel, I'm talking 4 and 8 ton and larger structural sections, almost all of it, 99.9% of this steel, comprising 100,000 tons of weight in each of these buildings, was distributed laterally outside the footprint of these towers, landing in buildings and up to 600 feet outside in each of these towers. So it wasn't either available to crush the building. Well, that's altogether, concrete and steel, more than 2/3 the weight of these buildings. So just by the disposition of these materials alone proves that this building didn't come down. But then we have the video evidence that shows the explosive nature of these buildings, with squibs or isolated explosive ejections 20, 40, 60 stories down below the jet plane impacts, that point, which we're told was a gravitational collapse, where the upper portion drove the rest of the building down to the ground and then somehow destroyed itself. Well, that's like a Volkswagen running into a Mack truck, right? It just doesn't happen that way. The lightest part of a structure can't possibly destroy the heavier, cold, hard, intact steel below the point of jet plane impacts, which is stronger and stronger and stronger with every story going all the way down the building. The law of conservation of energy says that when there's two bodies, there's an equal and opposite destructive force. That upper lighter part would have been destroyed. And guess what? All the videos, all the photos show exactly that. It is being destroyed. It telescopes in on itself in both cases, the North and the South Tower, such that they're gone prior to what then are additional explosions heard by 156 witnesses, documented from the transcripts, from the oral histories, documented by Graham McQueen, a professor who says these guys see like an explosion wrapping all the way around the belt, all these explosions. And most of them talk about explosions before there was any collapse of the building.
That's right.
A lot of them talk about flashes of light before there was any collapse of the building. This is
Richard,
very clear, this order of events.
Richard, let me jump in and just tell people, I want to remind people, you're just talking about the first two buildings. We haven't even got to World Trade Center 7 yet, which woke me up. And by the way, I was remiss when I said 2009, 2010, I was really thinking about the launch and the start of sgtreport.com and my YouTube channel. You're right, you and I met at a 9/11 Truth conference, and that must have been 2006 or 7, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. So you've been at this a very long time. You've been one of the key players in waking people up. In this online conference, man, what a lineup. I've got 7 or 8 of those Griffin books. And so the conference is on September 11th through the 13th. Is that at ae911truth.org? And what does it cost?
Yes, it's free for everybody.
It's free.
We want everybody to come.
Good. Good. All right. Well, I just want to make the point as we look at your backdrop there. Science, truth, and justice. Here's the problem with science, guys. The mainstream media ignores the collapse of World Trade Center 7 to this day. On 9/11, the BBC, Jane Stanley famously standing with the World Trade Center 7 burning behind her, the Salomon Brothers building, reports about the collapse of that building, saying its details are sketchy, but reports are the building has collapsed. It's still smoldering behind her. The signal fades, the satellite signal fades, and 20 minutes later, the building she just described as collapsing collapses at free fall speed. Then you get the 9/11 report, and I think, Richard, correct me if I'm wrong, what, a paragraph or two about World Trade Center 7 in that report, if anything? And then NIST takes what, 6, 7, 8 years to try to explain the collapse of World Trade Center 7, but they couldn't do it. Why? Because they refused to consider the possibility that explosives were used in the collapse of that building. Therefore, even their own fudged math models could not possibly explain the collapse of World Trade Center 7. I just wanted to get that out there, Richard, because to me it's the smoking gun of 9/11.
As is the evidence of extreme temperatures that can't possibly be accounted for in the official story. In Building 7, we have pools of molten iron, temperatures measured that exceed whatever office fires could have been, which were extinguished clearly when the building collapsed. And in the Twin Towers, we have all this evidence of molten iron pouring out of the South Tower, for instance, 10 minutes prior to its collapse. We have evidence of molten iron in the crab claw excavators that were pulling up this material dripping with white hot yellow material, molten material. We can tell by its color of molten iron and steel what its temperature is. This is exceeding 2,500 degrees, which is documented by many. 2,800 degrees is where molten iron Fahrenheit begins to melt. And so what can produce those? Office fires are only 500, 600 degrees, maybe 1,400 degrees. NIST claims 1,800 degrees, but that's still 1,000 degrees shy of the melting point of iron or steel, which we have so much evidence of. In fact, the U.S. Geological Survey finds billions of previously molten iron microspheres throughout all the World Trade Center dust. Where do they come from? They don't even know. They don't even speculate. Well, where could they have come from? Well, molten iron is the byproduct of thermite. Thermite is an incendiary used by the military to cut through steel like a hot knife through butter. So we have in experiments of of thermite going off, that it produces these spherical particles. Why? Well, because of surface tension. And it's just very clear where these come from. In fact, analysis of all of these molten iron spheres show that they're have the direct signature of thermite and thermate, actually, as well, because they have sulfur in them. Thermate's added to thermite, becomes much more effective cutting through steel. And so that explains the sulfur, which NIST struggled to explain, saying, well, gosh, there must be sulfur. There's sulfur in gypsum wallboard, so that must be what caused it. Well, gypsum wallboard's been used for 100 years to protect steel. It's never turned around and attacked the steel that it's designed to protect. And so the sulfur is found, molten iron's found. All this is the evidence of thermite and thermate. And so it's very clear what's happening here. Well, it goes even deeper, Sean. The international team of scientists led by Niels Harrit in Copenhagen finds red-gray chips in all, they thought they were paint. All these dust samples show these, and they do a deep analysis on these. And
it's non-ignited thermite, right?
Go ahead.
It's non-ignited thermate or thermite, correct?
It's unignited. That's right. What's so curious. And it's fluid applied, apparently. That's how it gets its dual layer, red and gray. And so they do this analysis, and they find what? Iron oxide particles and aluminum platelets that are 1,000 times smaller than the diameter of a human hair. Very advanced, sophisticated, made only in the most advanced defense contracting laboratories. This is very clearly something that should not be found in all the World Trade Center dust. So we have unignited evidence, we have ignited evidence, and this is the evidence that we're bringing to the application for an inquest. This is what's got the family members so concerned about the real cause of their loved ones. And that's where Matt comes into the picture.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I don't mean to interrupt at all, but I did want to just jump in and remind people, this is a human story. If you're angry about listening to this and you take yourself back to that day, and I think many of our listeners, boy, life goes fast, many of you maybe don't remember that day, weren't old enough, or weren't even born yet. But if you're angry about what happened on that day, imagine being the sibling of somebody trapped in those towers. It's a very human story, and what gripped me that day is so many of those folks leaping out of those towers, because now, in hindsight, I know the extreme heat inside those towers, even though they were no longer on fire, I think was forcing people out of the buildings. It's absolutely one of the most horrific things I've ever seen. It is one of the biggest crimes against humanity ever perpetrated, and if we have a few minutes left at the end, Richard, I would like to ask you, who did it? But we'll hold that for now. We'll turn it over to Matt Campbell, who lost his brother Jeff in the North Tower. Tell us about your brother.
He was 31. He's an intelligent chap. He'd been working in Manhattan for a couple of years for Reuters. Wasn't his usual place of work, like I mentioned earlier. It was a conference, and he just happened to be an attendee there on the 106th floor. It was a big shock to us, the manner of his death, and just, you're not really prepared for anyone suddenly dying, certainly not murder. We were kind of, when I say we, my wife and my mum, who was on holiday with us at the time, were kind of spared the non-stop TV coverage, which is possibly why I don't have that kind of image seared into my mind, because we were on holiday and didn't have access to TVs. And the first time I sort of knew something was going on, I think maybe the South Tower had fallen, but it was a really poor picture in a bar cafe. So I didn't really know what was going on until, a couple of hours later. It's 19 years now, and my brother's not been around to see my own children grow up, and my younger brother, who didn't have kids at the time, have his family. And it's hard every day for my mum and dad dealing with what happened.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, tell us about the inquest petition. Tell us about your role in the conference. And we want justice. That's all anybody has ever wanted in regards to 9/11, and we've gotten precious little of it. We've really gotten zero justice in this case.
One of my big frustrations as a family member is, we've not had that process that you go through typically when someone's murdered. Whether that helps with closure or not, doesn't matter. There is a process that you go through, and we don't feel that any families really had that opportunity, but certainly us. In the UK, we have something called an inquest, and that's normally held when someone dies suddenly or in suspicious circumstances. And obviously, in this case, it was very violent and obviously murder. And so he actually had an inquest back in 2013. It was adjourned from 2004, but it involved 9 other families. And it really was a rubber stamped, process. Just, I think they spent about 3 minutes talking about my brother, and, and similar for all the other victims. And they pretty much parroted the 9/11 Commission report and just, the official narrative. And I always felt that there hadn't really been any proper investigation by the British authorities. So anyway, in the UK, there is a very specific mechanism by which you can actually challenge the findings of an inquest, which is held in something called a coroner's court. And, inquests, like I said, held when someone suddenly dies. So it might be a family challenging the way that someone died in police custody in a jail cell, for example. And there is a very specific mechanism that allows you to petition or put forward an application to the Attorney General, who at the moment in the UK is a lady. She's actually a member of Parliament, but she has this role. She was an ex-barrister, but she's the Attorney General. And so the mechanism allows you, under the Coroner's Act, to submit an application to her, and depending on the weight of the evidence and other things that you can challenge, like insufficiency of inquiry and fraud and stuff like that, she can issue her authority to the High Court, and then the High Court we would be requesting to quash the original inquest and to open and hold a brand new inquest. And, I'm very confident that when we actually present this application, we're in the process of putting that together now with a top barrister, a lawyer in the UK. And I'm very confident that the Attorney General will give her authority, because we've got bucket loads of evidence that wasn't considered at his inquest. And, she should give her authority to the High Court, and the High Court normally issues an order to a coroner's court to open the inquest, which will be the first opportunity to get any of this evidence into a court of law. Inquests are kind of strange things. They're very, very, very focused on essentially, where, who, when, and the cause of death, which is actually perfect for, the evidence that we have. Is essentially, no, he didn't die from a building collapse due to a plane crashing into it. He died because either directly or indirectly, because of the use of explosives and incendiaries. And so, like I said, the mechanism really is tailor-made for us as a family to challenge the original inquest, use all the evidence that architects, engineers and others have been collating all these years, and actually get it into a court of law. So I'm very hopeful that, provided we can raise enough funds and, put the application together with all the evidence, with all the expert testimony and witness statements that are being put together, that we're going to be successful.
Well, Godspeed to you and your family, and I'm hopeful too. I'm hopeful for you, but I am skeptical because we've seen the way the UK basically does a pretty good job of burying and covering up the problem of child sex trafficking and pedophilia. We don't have to get into that here, and I'm sorry to even bring it up, but I'm very skeptical that we're going to see justice in a UK court or a US court. But we'll turn it back to Richard.
Sorry, Sean, just on that point, I mean, I would also point out, though, to counter your argument, that I understand that skepticism, but in the UK, I can give you two examples where, the level of cover-up that went on and corruption went right to the top. And we're talking Prime Minister and the Lord Chief Justice. And I'm talking specifically there about Bloody Sunday and the murder of civilians in Ireland. That was covered up by Ted Heath, the then Prime Minister, within 24 hours.
Boom, boom, boom. Ted Heath, a pedophile. Ted Heath, after his death, was accused of being complicit in the murder of as many as 14 children. I was going to bring it up. I didn't want to go there, but you brought up the name. That's why this stuff gets covered up.
I think what I'm trying to say there is, I am still very hopeful that this is actually going to work. To overturn Bloody Sunday. We also had Hillsborough, which was a football stadium disaster, which, the police were involved in the cover-up. Family members fought it, got it through the process for the Attorney General. The original inquests were quashed, new inquests were held, and the families got, certainly more truth shined on the events of their loved one's death, but justice. And so I would disagree. I mean, I can't speak for the US system, but it definitely can and does work in the UK.
And this particular, to your point, Sean, this particular law, which allows for a new inquest, is designed so that it's not difficult to get a new inquest. It's a very low threshold. If the Attorney General sees that there might be cause for a new inquest, he always has granted this then goes to the High Court, and they have always, in response to the recommendation of the Attorney General, have granted a new inquest. So this is the good news. And our hope here is that the new inquest will have to deal with this evidence, of course, and once they do, there is no other conclusion that they can reach other than that these towers were destroyed by incendiaries and explosives, that these people were murdered. And when this happens, it will create a public outswell, an outrage, and lawsuits, paving the way for lawsuits, not only in the UK, but here in the US. And that's why we have to support Matt with his legal counsel, with Nick Stanage, at Doughty Street Chambers, who is, in fact, an assistant coroner also. So this is just made for us to step into and finally get this evidence into a court system outside the U.S. In this case, the opportunities are great because it can go all across Europe. There were people from all those countries in Europe and around the world that were killed in the World Trade Center. So these guys are not inexpensive. They're $500 an hour. And every hour that they have spent so far has proven to all of us at AE 9/11 Truth and to Matt's family that these guys are the top opportunity that we have to make this successful. So we have to raise the $100,000 that it's going to cost. And we're well on our way, but we've got quite a ways to go still. So we're hoping that your supporters, listeners will, again, Sean, see fit to take the action that supporters of other radio stations have not come to the level of your supporters. So we know that you've got the supporters that are absolutely key in making things like this happen.
It's an incredible group. I hear that from time and time again. I hear that from authors. I have the most incredible supporters. So tell them, where do they, if everybody listening pitched in $5 or $10, where do they do that? AE 9/11 Truth? Yep,
just go straight there. And if you're ambitious, go to ae911truth.org/inquest.
Okay. All right. Here's my final question, and I'm so sorry we only have 4 or 5 minutes left. This is my fault today, guys. But I wanted to ask you, and we can leave it as a teaser, Richard. I mentioned it earlier. I mean, we have people like Larry Silverstein, lucky Larry Silverstein, okay, who just happened to take control of the World Trade Center entire complex, 90 days before the buildings collapsed? And he had the prescience to get the buildings insured against acts of terrorism. What a brilliant guy. And he walked away with billions of dollars in compensation after the towers went down on 9/11. So I teased, let's leave it a tease. Maybe you have some people at the conference that will address this. Who done it?
Yeah, we certainly want to know that too, Sean, and that's why we've been assembling all this evidence so that we can get it into a court system, in this case, the international court system, so that we can get a real criminal investigation that'll follow these leads all the way up. Who makes nanothermite? This is not made in a cave in Afghanistan. We're obviously talking about some sort of an inside operation here, which has levels that go very high, which is capable of covering up the crime, which is one of the reasons Kevin Ryan wrote Another 19 Suspects. And we encourage everybody to read that book in pursuit of this critical question, as well as the works of David Ray Griffin, who will be appearing at our conference on September 11, 12, and 13, along with a dozen other key pioneers in the 9/11 Truth movement and additional guests. So yeah, we want to know. I want to know who gave the orders. I want to know, why the Air Force lied about the air drills that were going on that day. Why the CIA lied to Congress. Why John Farmer, the 9/11 Commission report lawyer, said that there was a decision not to tell the American people the truth about 9/11. There's a lot of answers that have to still be forthcoming here, and a real investigation is how we're going to get there.
All right. Well, you've been moving the needle like nobody else for more than a decade, approaching 2 decades. I can't believe how fast time goes by. This is the story of our lifetimes, guys. It is the event that woke so many of us up. Guys, our guests have been the founder of 911truth.org, Richard Gage. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Sean.
And the brother of Jeff Campbell, Matt Campbell. Matt, good luck to you. God bless you. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Sean.
Cheers. And friends, just a reminder that September 11th through September 13th, 9/11 online conference at ae911truth.org. It's free, but you know what? Suggested donation, throw in $10. Help Matt with the inquest. All right, guys, thanks so much for tuning in. We appreciate it very much. And for real news, please visit us directly at sgtreport.com, the antidote to corporate propaganda. God bless you all. Bye-bye.
And this was a common phenomenon also, that these vital organ transplants could be booked in advance. You could book, if you were a foreign transplanteur, a heart transplant a month in advance, 2 months in advance, which means obviously somebody was being killed. There was a date by which somebody would be killed for the organs.